1, 2, 3, 4,
1, 2, 3, 4.
America's Red Army is the opposing force, known as the OPFOR. Its mission is to wage simulated war with regular U.S. Army tank platoons. The OPFOR teaches the hardest lessons of combat to these platoons by being a ferocious enemy that will stop at nothing to win.
The OPFOR's reputation, not only locally but Army-wide, is well known that we're the force that the rest of the Army has to beat. Our success rate is well over 90% against the Blue Force. A lot of variables that go into that factor, but I think that we take a lot more pride in what we do because of where we are and what our mission is. The tougher we make it for them, the easier it is for them to learn their lessons. And so when they get to combat, like they just did in Desert Storm, that is no longer a learning process. They can apply the lessons that they learned the hard way here.
The hard way means fighting against the OPFOR's Soviet battle doctrine. Visiting tank forces are amazed by the OPFOR's combat capability utilizing Soviet tactics.
The OPFOR, oh, it was a good feeling. I came in '86 with the reserve unit, and we learned a lot. They beat the devil out of us, and I was like, God, who are those guys? And then down the road, I had the opportunity to be part of the OPFOR, and I love it here.
The OPFOR's Red Force will attempt to defeat a visiting Blue Force tank platoon. The Blue Force will be fighting with American battle tactics.
A Blue Force is platoon tactics, company team tactics, small units fighting against large forces. Now I'm in the OPFOR, we have the large forces, overwhelming large force fighting against small units. We will launch our attack with 120 plus vehicles. We're going against a task force that probably has 50 to 60 vehicles in it. So larger numbers on our side, we being the bad guys this time, going against the good guys, and it's overwhelming.
The overwhelming might of the OPFOR will stagger the Blue Force soldiers. OPFOR's superior training will help Blue Force warriors achieve total victory on a real battlefield. Trench warfare during World War I would claim more than 800,000 lives. British naval officer Winston Churchill promoted the deployment of armored land vehicles. It was hoped that this new tank weapon would protect advancing British soldiers from the bullets of German machine guns. The tank's early successes changed the way wars would be fought, as soon as tank technology caught up with its potential. By World War II, tanks were the backbone of the European armies. In the northern Sahara Desert, German Afrika Korps Commander Erwin Rommel was ultimately defeated by British Lieutenant General Bernard Law Montgomery in their legendary tank battles. On the Eastern Front, the German Army's panzers were being outgunned by the Soviets' T-34s. Although experts in combining air and ground forces, the German military was ultimately crushed in the East by the massive deployment of Soviet tanks and artillery. This Soviet battle doctrine emphasizing huge numbers of armored vehicles is still followed today. The Soviet Army's victory at Kursk started their march into Berlin. On the Western Front, U.S.-built M4 Sherman tanks were commanded by Generals Omar Bradley, George S. Patton, and Courtney H. Hodges. In the Allies' final drive of the war, a key bridge which crossed the Rhine River at Remagen was captured intact. The fierce house-to-house battle inside the German city was over within hours. The victory at Remagen allowed Allied tank forces to push into the heart of Germany, and within a month, the war in Europe was over. Across the Pacific, U.S. Marines fought with tanks in their land battles against the Japanese Army. After a Japanese stronghold had been bombarded by aircraft and from offshore naval guns, the landed Marines and their tanks were assigned the bloody job of conquering the island. A complex system of tunnels and pillboxes meant that the final fights would be extremely close and dangerous. Tanks were modified with flamethrowers to root out the most tenacious Japanese defenders. The Japanese soldier was just about the most dedicated fighting man ever put into battle. Out of 120,000 troops stationed on Okinawa, only 7,400 allowed themselves to be taken prisoner. Many Japanese who refused to give up suffered horrible deaths as they were incinerated by flamethrowers. As in Europe, tanks made absolutely clear to all which army controlled the area. They were the final decisive force in each of the war's land battles. The Soviets, who occupied North Korea after World War II, installed a communist government hostile to the United Nations Democratic Republic in the South. Less than 1 year after independence, the South underwent a surprise attack as 8 full North Korean infantry divisions invaded across the border. With less than half of the North's military strength, South Korea's army, fighting beside a handful of U.S. troops, were nearly overwhelmed before help could arrive. The Soviet-built T-34 tanks left over from World War II were still awesome weapons in the early 1950s. North Korea's Soviet-styled massive deployment of armor and infantry left the democratic forces no choice but to retreat. The communist momentum was to carry them down to the tip of the Korean peninsula near Busan. Commanding General Douglas MacArthur and his officers planned an ingenious landing at Incheon, near the capital city of Seoul. Troops, heavily armed M41 Walker Bulldog and M4 Sherman tanks were convoyed to attack the communist forces from behind and cut off their supplies from the north. The panicking communists fought UN forces fiercely. Communist tank platoons were stopped dead in their tracks. The Korean War would now become one of attrition, not too different from the trench warfare of World War I. After checking a Chinese counterattack, General James Van Fleet retook the offensive and destroyed the communist forces below the 38th parallel. The Soviet political system is an unstable entity fighting for its own survival. Superpower rivalry may have dissipated, but it's simply impossible to know what Soviet intentions are in the long term. Soviet military advisors and Soviet weaponry are still accessible to such radical countries as Syria, Libya, and Iraq. The OPFOR, equipped with modified tanks and artillery, prepares American forces for realistically combating the Soviet war machine, wherever it may be found.
It's the most realistic training that any force could get. You can't get any more realistic than having a motorized rifle regiment of T-72s and BMPs coming at you. We have all the equipment that a Soviet Union army would have. We use very similar to the Soviet tactics, and there again, when the world situation changes, they come down with new tactics or a different type of doctrine that they want us to do, so that the unit here that's getting the training value will get that for their mission that they're going to have. As with the conflict in the Middle East, they came down and we tried different tactics.
These tactics are learned in the punishing wasteland of the Mojave Desert. At the edge of this broiling landscape is the National Training Center at Fort Irwin, California. The National Training Center, or NTC, offers 1,000 square miles of harsh terrain that is ideal for force-on-force and live fire training. The NTC is home to the OPFOR, which remains ready all year long to take on U.S. tank platoons in simulated warfare. Their reputation for ferocity is well known in military circles, and visiting Blue Forces face it with the wary trepidation of a genuine enemy. The inside world of the OPFOR is a haunting place where the real and unreal are turned upside down. The spoils of past wars, such as weapons and vital battle doctrines snatched from the Soviets, lie under the flaming banner of the Soviet hammer and sickle. OPFOR combat personnel will do more than memorize tactics or learn to think and speak in Russian. They will become the enemy. Soviet T-72 and T-80s are not referred to as their tanks, but for OPFOR soldiers, they are our tanks. American tanks are altered to look like Soviet tanks and BMP infantry fighting vehicles, and are called VisMods, short for visual modifications. Lasers replace live ammunition once the battle begins, but for all intents and purposes, the OPFOR will be viewed by U.S. tank platoons as a ruthless adversary that will do its best to damn them into defeat.
When you really look at it, it's almost like a real actual live battle. Only difference is instead of using live rounds, we're using a laser. And if you do the job the way you train to do it, it's almost like an actual live battle, because basically we're using everything we would in a real battle, and the only difference is live rounds and lasers. So it's pretty high tech, high speed.
Just a matter of taking things to its simplest form, applying it on the battlefield, and it's just like an adrenaline rush to you when you go force on force, and you don't think anymore about well, what do I have to do? It's reaction time. You react to the situation, and then after the battles are over with, everyone gets an after-action review. The Blue Force, they have their after-action review, and they talk about things that they've done well, things that they could have done better. We have after-action reviews the same way. We rehearse. When we go into a battle on the morning of a battle, we are well prepared.
We use very similar to the Soviet tactics. Basically, the reconnaissance units, what they will do is they will go out and probe the enemy. Okay, we portray in the Soviets. We're going to probe the American lines, find out where their weak points are, where they have their equipment dug in, their reaction forces staged for a counterattack, their reserve forces where they're at. We're going to try and locate and pinpoint their command posts, their field trains, their supply lines.
On the morning of the battle, the OPFOR readies itself for action. Tanks are prepped for hitting the desert and merely await the order to advance. Vehicles and soldiers are equipped with a multiple integrated laser engagement system, or MILES, to tell a vehicle or soldier when they are hit. Strobe lights flash when a tank is destroyed or a soldier is killed, and Hoffman devices provide sound and visual effects for a tank's main gun as it fires. The order is given and OPFOR tanks move quickly, burrowing into their trenches. Like deadly pit vipers, OPFOR tanks will hide and wait for their prey, striking when the time is right.
We got two task forces coming at us. They're going to be coming, one from the south and looping up into the gap probably, and then one straight across the middle. heading right down the gap, and we're talking about a total of 70+ vehicles coming at our 28 that are dug in, and it should be a pretty good fight.
Second Lieutenant Timothy Karcher, an OP-4 tank platoon leader, knows a good fight does not necessarily guarantee victory for his side. As dawn peeks through the foreboding sky, Karcher prepares for a gruesome struggle.
They're going to be coming down here, around to the north of Hill 466. They'll be engaged by artillery fires out here. And they'll come right down in here through the gap between the Furlong Ridge and the Whale Ridge, which are out to our front. They'll enter my engagement area and my battalion engagement area right in here. We'll attempt to kill as many of them as possible. It's going to get real ugly here because they can root us out of here because they have the masses to do it. We're looking at 3-to-1 odds right now at best, and it's getting worse every second.
It is no exaggeration that the conflict will be ugly and brutal. For in today's battle, it will be Blue Force tanks on the offensive and Lieutenant Karcher's OP-4 platoon facing a numerically superior enemy. The Blue Force, already on the move to attack the OP-4, but still out of range, will attempt to advance through a gap or through mountain ridges on either side of it. If Blue Force tank platoons can get through the gap or over the ridges without incident, then it will try to find as many of the OP-4 as possible and blow them off the map. Lieutenant Karcher's worst fears are realized early as Blue Force begins its attack with support from tank-killing A-10 Thunderbolts. Pinpointing OP-4 targets and obliterating them with flares, the A-10s will hurt Karcher and his battalion severely unless Red Force anti-aircraft fire can shoot it down. The A-10's decimating attack incurs OP-4 casualties far beyond what Karcher expected. His T-72s and their crews lie dead or dying in the unforgiving sands.
We'll be ready. I understand. I've just had 3 vehicles taken out by A-10s, so I'm down to 1 tank and 4 BMPs. And so they've depleted my force by almost half right now.
Karcher's tone is one of barely controlled fury. What remains of his platoon stays dug in and ready for the next attack.
They're trying to set in an overwatch on the Whale over here, and then they're probably going to try to push right up this gap at us. We'll see what happens.
Attacking through the gap is the strategy Karcher is counting Blue Force to adopt. But Blue Force knows that the gap is a potential killing field, so it will attempt to outwit Karcher and the OP-4 by negotiating the treacherous hills of Furlong Ridge. The climb will be tough, but going through the ridge above the gap might be the trick that catches the OP-4 completely off guard. Blue Force M1s and Bradleys lumber up the tortuous Furlong Ridge, hesitating to go too quickly, lest an unseen gang of T-72s and BMPs lash out from behind rocks or around the next hill. Nerves are frayed as the push forward for the Blue Force means moving into the unpredictable territory of the OP-4. Others have tried to fool the OP-4 in the past and have been destroyed for their efforts. But so far the coast is clear and the Blue Force platoons push forward. Still, Blue Force commanders know that OP-4 didn't get its awesome reputation without good reason. They know that down the road, there's going to be hell to pay. Suddenly, the OP-4 lashes back with airstrikes from F-4 Phantoms simulating MiG attack jets. Blue Force took a deadly gamble sneaking over the Furlong Ridge. The MiG may hurt them badly, but it will not prevent Blue Force M1s from firing on Karcher. Not moved by the desperate firefight, the lieutenant will watch and wait.
We got 2 M1s sitting there, and they're firing on us. Roger, on that 5th team, I count 1-5 approximate.
OP-4 tank losses are mounting, but Karcher knows that the blue tanks are forced into a deadly game of cat and mouse. Trapped on the ridge, the M1s must fire and fall back without being seen by the OP-4. One Blue Force tank gambles with such a tactic. Unfortunately, the gamble has failed. Picked off by the MiG, the M1's effort has proved fatal, and its miles indicator flashes. For the hapless crew just killed, they must wait out the battle in the elements. Noses bloodied, the remaining Blue Force watches the MiG streak off in search of other targets coming through the gap or over the mountain ridges. Some tankers feel that to be hit this early by the ruthless MiG before the real battle has even begun is a humiliating blow. With Bradley cannons blazing, the Blue Force Battalion is learning an agonizing lesson, that the OPT-4 MiG is good at killing. This realization means that different Blue Force tactics are required. They unleash a thick smoke screen to conceal their next move. Vigilant tank commanders and platoon leaders assess damage inflicted upon the OPT-4 while keeping an eye out for further MiG attacks. A decision is made to drive their Blue Force M1s down the middle of the gap. The smoke screen is good cover, but Blue Force knows that while OPT-4 can't see them, they can't see the OPT-4 either. It is a double-edged sword that contributes to a growing sense of unease within Blue Force ranks. Still, the renewed push forward by Blue Force tank platoon seems to go smoothly and without incident. So for now, the crews are thinking that the smokescreen tactic may have fooled the OPT-4. Without warning, Blue Force grinds to a halt. It has discovered that the OPT-4 had dug trenches to trap the M1s. Blue Force must clear the traps quickly or risk immediate slaughter by the OPT-4 MiGs and T-72s. Tank commanders watch anxiously as Blue Force infantry lays down suppressive fire on OPT-4 placements, holding off the bad guys long enough for their team to get past the traps. The traps are a testimonial to the infamous OPT-4 dirty battlefield tactics. Yet again, Blue Force is learning to deal with this kind of enemy. Giant AVLBs lay down bridges as tank crews can only watch and wait. As soon as the bridge is in place, the first M1 plows safely forward over the trap. It will not stop until it smashes into the teeth of Karcher's T-72s and BMPs. The rest of the Blue Force follows in quick succession. Man and machine trammel over the artificial bridge, racing toward an enemy that will tenaciously hold on to its position. The push into enemy-held territory takes on a horrifying grimness. The OPT-4s remain concealed and is far too quiet for comfort. Though Blue Force troops are not harassed crossing the bridge, everything seems too easy. There is a feeling of something terribly wrong in the air, and even with the smoke screen for cover, the good guys of Blue Force ask themselves the hardest questions of all. Where is the OPT-4? Why haven't they come out for a fair fight? Will they use chemical weapons? Are there more landmines? Will the next attack be by air or by land? Who will live and who will die? Is there a chance that these superhuman bad guys can be beaten? Or is the struggle so far just an ominous indication of a grisly defeat? The dug-in OPT-4 watches the delays encountered by Blue Force and is ready with a devastating retaliatory response. Vismod Soviet Hind attack helicopters are lethal tank killers. OPT-4 aviators can maneuver their choppers at incredible speeds, and their kill ratio is staggeringly high. In actual combat, one hit by an air-to-ground missile from a Hind chopper can tear a tank's armor apart within a split second. Blue Force tank crews are well aware of the deadliness of the Hind choppers, and their presence in the skies fills Blue Force ranks with a collective shudder of horror. The Hind choppers pummel Blue Force M1 tanks. NTC rules call for a tank to turn its turret around once it is destroyed. Air attack has caused utter havoc within the Blue Force platoons. However, shrewd tactical maneuvering by a few Blue Force tank crews has proved successful in allowing them to fight their way out from under the Hind chopper attack. For these brave tankers, there is one more chance for hurting Karcher's platoon. Hell-bent on revenge, the Blue Force tank crews have decided that someone else is going to take a beating. Payback time is about to begin.
Okay, stop it. Get us on the leg for trail. Quick.
The next move is up to Lieutenant Karcher. He knows that Blue Force tanks will think that he has no stomach for a fight if he pulls out of his dug-in position and makes a hasty retreat. The Op-4 gives a good act of turning tail and running for dear life, but the act is about to end as the retreating T-72s and BMPs suddenly spin into a 180-degree turn and prepare to meet the Blue Force head-on. The hunted becomes the hunter, as Karcher's platoon prepares to teach the Blue Force tanks that their daring tactic will not be without consequences. Blue Forces have suffered massive losses in combat, but Karcher's platoon can tell they still have a lot of fight in them. From out of their dug-in positions, the Op-4 surfaces, like a pack of coyotes that have coerced a dog into following it into the night. Karcher's platoon has lured the Blue Force into the open and prepares to kill them without mercy. Karcher orders his tanks full speed ahead. The Op-4 and Blue Force are now within range of each other's main gun rounds. Tank crews from both sides prepare for the fiercest showdown yet. The emotional climate of the exercise may be stress-filled and realistic, but Op-4 never loses sight of its mission objective, that of teaching the Blue Force tank crews how to fight against the worst of enemies.
Sniper in here. Okay, scan over there. We got Brads over there. So got it. Got a target. We got Mike 1 and 2 right here. Oh, you're engaging. Send it. Yes. Okay, you got 3 more to go. Hey, 1410, I'm covering. Kill that guy. Laying you on. There you go. Firing. Send it.
Some Blue Force tanks didn't even know what hit them.
Moving clear. Okay, guide right. I'm sorry. Outstanding. Keep it going. Keep it coming. Gotcha. Target. Mike 2. Oh. Hey, hold it up. Okay, you got a Brad right there. Kill his ass. Hey, 1410, I'm covering. Kill that guy.
When the smoke cleared and the tally of dead tanks and men were counted, the battlefield belonged to a victorious Op-4. Losses were heavy all around, and even in victory, Op-4 commanders conceded that both sides still had much to learn.
There's a lot more that I still have to learn about the Op-4 in the National Training Center. It gives me a different perspective, a different angle to look at how I can better train my platoon in a Blue Force unit.
We're going to do better, and I think that's part of the learning process that Blue Force has to go through out here, is to fight a tough and realistic Op-4 that's going to win a lot of times. But we're not out here to win. We're here to train the force.
War is not the place to learn from mistakes. The cost in human lives is too high, and there are no second chances for the dead. To survive and win the next war, the Army must prevent any mistakes made by inexperienced soldiers and commanders in combat. By playing the part of a ruthless enemy, the OPT-4 will give tough lessons in training to regular Army tank platoons and drill into them 3 unchanging maxims of warfare: lead, train, and win.
One, two, three, forward!
Oh,